Hi, I'm Zach, and this is my Ardenn Rograkh Poly Godo Sunforger control deck. Roger. He's a kobold, has some keywords, notably menace, means you can often attack on turn 1 or 2 if you don't have haste, which the deck doesn't really use haste that much. We have a few things that care about hitting people with a 0/1, so he's a fairly relevant body. The main thing he's used for is polymorphing. So we run a variety of effects that exile a creature or do something with it, and then put the flip cards off our deck until we hit a creature and put it in play. The only target for that, here's a few other of those. These spells all do the same thing. They all polymorph. Reality Scramble has Retrace, which is a little relevant. And we're going to polymorph into a Godo Bandit Warlord. Godo searches for an equipment. We're going to search for a Sunforger. Sunforger, Boros instant. We run every way to copy the trigger. We run every way to find this Sunforger. We see it every game consistently. We have Enlightened Tutor, every tutor you can name. But how do we actually win? Okay, so we got Test of Endurance. This is surprisingly the deck's main win condition, other than people scooping out of not wanting to play against this deck anymore. It seems like awful garbage, but there's not a lot of ways to win with Boros instants, and we have a way to gain like 20 life off of an instant oftentimes, so that's going to be our main win con. Divine Intervention's not a win condition, but I own one, so I want to play it. People don't like this card, but I get more dopamine than I would from winning by doing this, so stop me. Ghostly Prison, Blind Obedience, and Authority of the Councils. These all provide a similar effect to the deck, protecting our life total. Especially like Authority of the Councils and Blind Obedience, because these also have more text. This slows people down, it makes their creatures enter tapped. Artifacts entering tapped is huge, and they also provide the additional utility, all three of these, of being white permanents that just stick around on the board for a while, which is relevant because we run Misfill Planes, which I'll get to in a little bit. Curse of Opulence. We run this because we have a 0 attack, 0 mana Menace Commander. This is super good because it's just free mana. Everyone else always attacks into it. This nets you the mana you cast it with in one turn. In a turn cycle, you're often mana positive. Pretty solid. Fighter class, Tutor Sunforger. We never really use any of the other modes, but it's also a white permanent that sticks around, which we need. So this is Arcane Bombardment. Whole lot of text. Mainly, if you can get this on board and untap or protect it, the game is functionally over. We're casting instants every turn, and they're never really going to recover from the amount of value you get. So we're going to be rocking that. We got the Faceless Looting. This card's honestly a flex slot. Super solid. Oftentimes we put an Enlightened Tutor target on top of our deck, and then we need to draw it that turn. Usually a Test of Endurance. So being able to draw it and play it that turn, it can be the difference between winning and losing. Got a few more tutors here. All three of these exist solely to search out Sunforger. We have a few other equipment that do things so that they're not dead cards when we don't have the Sunforger, or when we already have the Sunforger, but we want to see it every game, so we're running every copy of it that can functionally exist. We got Open the Armory is probably the worst one, but we do have a couple auras that are playable, so it comes in handy from time to time. This is a card that also searches our library. This one's 5 mana, so it's a little up there, but it gambles 3 times. I think it's pretty solid, especially in a deck with graveyard synergy and ways to pull things out of the yard. We're never using the opponent's draw cards mode. We don't give out resources here, but it's still solid. Searches out a Sunforger. We got a few other utility sorceries. The only wipe in the deck is Farewell. This card you should be running in your white decks. It wins the game on its own. It's modal. Even though we have a lot of these permanent types, we almost always have the fewest creatures. Instant exile. It swipes the yards. You have to be doing that. It's great. The only wipe in the deck. Jessica's Will's awesome because we have a 0 mana commander. We're getting both modes on turn 3 consistently, which can often let us deploy our entire hand. And then Savine's Reclamation is recursion for the Sunforger. We do, of course, run every fetch land that we can be running. So being able to flashback and get them out of the graveyard in a pinch to hit a land drop is very solid. But we also have the additional utility of being able to search Sunforger out or get Sunforger out of our graveyard. Few more artifacts to go over here. We got the other equipment in the deck. They're all utility pieces. None of them are. This is not a Voltron deck. It might look like one, but it is not. Feast and Famine. It untaps our lands. This deck is very mana hungry, and having the ability to untap your lands on a Menace body is super relevant. Dowsing Dagger, slept on card. It's good. It flips into a land that taps for 3 mana. We can do this the turn we play it. It's better than Thran Dynamo. It's also an equipment, so we can often cheat the cost on it with Ardenn. Sword of the Animus, same deal. Ramp on an equipment is solid in a deck like this, just so we have more targets for our tutors. And then Arch Map, another one of those white permanents that stick around for our Misfill planes. And this also searches out 2 planes because it's a good card. Oftentimes it's a slow rampant growth that leaves behind a white permanent that people ignore, which is solid. Then we got a variety of rocks. I'm running pretty much every good 2-mana rock except for a few that I think don't make the cut. Gilded Lotus here. Dex mana hungry, I like this rock. We got a Manascape Refractor. This is also a Misfill Plains, which is very relevant. Normally I steer clear of 3-mana rocks, but having the ability to do Misfill Plains in this deck twice instead of once lets you do some very broken shenanigans. It's a very good card. Urborg Coffers players often exist. Any mono black deck will fear this card because it's often their coffers or their cradle or whatever. It scales with your pods. We got talismans, signets, and more signets. These all do the same thing. I especially like Boros Signet in this deck because it taps for the exact colors of mana you need to unequip Sunforger. And then a Soul Ring because it's a commander deck. Alright, the last utility artifacts we run, you'll notice we have a lot of slots for utility. That's because we run no creatures. Sensei's Top, Searching the Enlightened target off of our deck is insane, especially right away. Expedition Map. We need to find Misfill Plains every game, literally every game. It's one of the best lands in the deck. Lithoform Engine lets us copy a trigger. Getting a double Sunforger unequipped is extremely relevant. We'll just place that on top of there. Sculpting steals a second Sunforger. There's also a 1-mana version of this that can only become the copy of an equipment. I think that card's unplayable even in this deck. The utility from this being able to become an Arch Map or a Gilded Lotus or another Feast and Famine is enough reason for me to want to pay 2 extra mana for the effect. Don't at me. Skull Clamp. Now, Skull Clamp in an Ardenn deck is extremely relevant because you can actually Skull Clamp other people's creatures. So you move to combat, you can equip the clamp to someone else's creature. It dies, you draw the cards, they cry. I've Skull Clamped so many mana dorks. I never equip this to my own stuff. There's some weird trigger shenanigans that you have to be aware of. For example, you can't equip your Sunforger to your own thing and your Skull Clamp to their thing with Ardenn. Just have your rulings ready if you try to do this, because no one knows how it works, apparently. We got rings. This also copies a trigger. It's in the deck for that reason alone. We want to be doing this every game. We want to see these every game. double Sunforgering like 3 times is enough to close out a game often. And then we have Thematic Compass because it's a pet card and I like to hit land drops. And Maze of Ith is cool but unplayable. And then we have an Isochron Scepter. This deck runs Silence, like 20 instants that this can be put under. So having that versatility and being able to spam the same instant for only 2 mana is extremely good. Often you can put spells under here and people just scoop because they see like you put a Mandate of Peace. You can put a Silence or an Orm's Chant under here, and in a 1 versus 1 game, like when the other players have been eliminated, they should not be playing anymore. This deck can close out a 1v1 like the nastiest deck you've ever seen. We have another polymorph effect. This one polymorphs 2 creatures. So often, we're never going to polymorph Ardenn. Usually you're going to target someone's stacks effect or some permanent that bothers you, and then they'll hit like a Signet or something. Invoke Calamity is some recursion, lets us recurse some instants that we've been spamming. It's also an instant, so if you have a Silence in your yard, you get to time walk someone. And then we have some big value instants that we can cast. Heartwarming Redemption searches is a self-wheel that gains you life. Our win condition is having a lot of life, so this is pretty solid. We also have a fair bit of graveyard recursion, so the cards aren't just gone. Crush to Contraband. I really love the exile removal on this. Card's mid, but in this deck, exiling an enchantment and an artifact is quite solid for 2 mana at instant speed. Repeated Reverberation is insane in this deck. This is a core piece of the deck, actually. We're often going to be, when we double Sunforge with one of our copy effects, we're going to be searching out this and War Report, which gains life equal to the number of creatures and artifacts on the battlefield. You do this on a clogged up board state, which this deck creates every game, and you'll easily gain 60 life at instant speed in response to someone like attacking you or something. It's disgusting. You can untap, cast Enlightened Tutor, find your win condition, and then just survive a turn cycle and the game is over. We also run Big Score. This is, I found suspicious, it's oddly good in an end step because it gives you the 2 treasures, which is enough to you bank the mana for the next turn, which you often need to do exactly what you need. This deck needs every piece of mana it can get, and then discarding a card and drawing 2 lets you filter your hand a little bit. Now we have some utility pieces. These are the main things you're going to be searching out with Sunforger. These are our broken spells. I have a huge chunk of cards in here. This deck has like a giant Sunforger package. We run no creatures, so it's entirely Sunforger package. Seething Song lets us go up mana with a Sunforger unequip. This is good if you need to resolve some big spell, like an Arcane Bombardment. Boil. This destroys all islands. I don't like blue players. And I don't like having my spells countered, and this makes it fairly hard for them to do it. People play around this in my pods. After you do it a couple times, the spell does get a little worse because people stop fetching for duels. But for greedy mana bases, just obliterates them. It's 4 mana, kill target player a lot of the time. Mono blue, you're done. Debt of Loyalty. This exists as a piece for when we're double Sunforgering. You get this and a generous gift to steal their commander, or well, not their commander, but like whatever else. Magnetic Theft equips an equipment to a creature. This can be especially good when we're double Sunforgering to end the chain with the Sunforger still attached, so we can continue to hold up interaction while also responding to someone else's spell. We can also surprise Sunforger with this, so if it looks like we're tapped out and we don't have enough mana to do it, they cast something, we respond by attaching it and just immediately unattaching it. Pretty nuts. Angel's Grace. This I honestly haven't had that much success with. Oftentimes I find I untap and die anyway, but it's in there just in case. I would be remiss if I lost because I didn't run this card, so I do. Enlightened Tutor, we cast this every game. It is how we develop our engine, the Sunforger engine, because it can search Rings of Brighthearth or another ramp piece. Pretty much anything the deck can be searched with an Enlightened Tutor. It also has the little cool interaction of finding our win condition. So you're going to want an Enlightened Tutor for this deck. Pull from Eternity lets us yoink a spell out of exile and put it into our graveyard. This is a core piece. Lets us cycle Teferi's Protection, which exiles itself on resolution. So we can potentially put this in our put the Teferi's in our graveyard, Misfill Plains it into the deck, and then proceed to cast it again at instant speed. Very nasty. No one plays around it. Exile is not gone in this deck. We have Tithe. This is a instant, notably, that is Sunforgerable and searches out a instant or a Plains 2 if someone controls more lands than you. And that is enough to find Misfill Plains and often a plateau. This means that we can see Misfill Plains from our Sunforger unattached, which means we can see it every game, even if we don't find it off of a fetch or something. Very solid. I would never cut that card. I run Mana Tithe. This is just a card I like. We have hard counters like Tybalt's Trickery and Lapse of Certainty, but I think Mana Tithe is funny, so I run Mana Tithe as well. If someone's tapping out for an instant, I'll get Mana Tithe as opposed to Tybalt's, and it is slightly better, but that doesn't happen all that often, especially the second or third time you play this deck with the same pod. We got a Swords. That's the Swords to Plowshares. Spell's pretty good. Generous Gift and Chaos Warp destroy target permanent, essentially. We need these. I run 2 in case 1 has already been used. They're functionally the same. So these are going to be our blowout spells. People are going to try and kill the shit out of you because you're playing a really toxic deck that prevents them from playing the game. So we're going to run ways to prevent them from killing us. Comeuppance, this is great. They swing with their whole board after you counter their spell, and you just board wipe them. Settle the Wreckage is the same deal, especially good against multicolored decks, like some 4-color Atraxa garbage. Just like exile their whole board, and they get like 2 basics. Hooray. I've also had a lot of success using this when you're not even getting attacked. Someone attacks someone else and you want to exile their whole board, you do it. It's a good play. Got an Orm's Chant. This is one of the best spells in the deck. It's the best functional silence effect. So they can't play spells. You can pay the kicker off of a Sunforger unequipped, notably. They can't play spells, and they can't attack. It's an auto pass for the most part, unless they've got like a bunch of Planeswalkers or something. You do it in their upkeep right after they untap, and they are unhappy. I've gotten some great reactions off of this. It's a hilarious card. It doesn't exile itself upon resolution, so you can cycle this with Misfill Plains. Just do it every turn in a 1v1 situation. Silence is a second effect that's not as good, but still playable. Mandate of Peace. Fun trick with this card, you'll tell someone, hey, let me know when you move to combat. Oftentimes they'll move immediately to combat because they want to see what you got. You'll Mandate of Peace them in response to some trigger. Their trigger will fizzle because of how Mandate of Peace reads, and their turn will be functionally over. It's a blowout every time, works like a charm. I would not pass on this spell ever. It's one of the best blowouts because it's a fog that also they aren't attacking. Like the combat phase is just over. So it exiles all their triggers and spells. Blacksmith skill are Givian Find, Apostle's Blessing, and Teferi's. These are all protection spells. This isn't really a protection spell, but it gets Sunforger out of the yard, so it sort of is. These two, you want a critical mass of spells like this. Just target permanent isn't destroyed when it is, because people are going to try to remove Sunforger because they can't play the game when Sunforger's attached. So we need every way to not have that happen. And then Teferi's Protection is probably the most searched spell off of Sunforger, I'd imagine. Maybe behind Enlightened Tutor. It's gonna make whatever they do to your board state not happen, and then you get a whole turn cycle where people can't interact with you, and then you untap and often do it again. It can be very oppressive. Alright, next I have a Lonely Land tax. That's not with the other enchantments for some reason. This is a white enchantment that sticks around on the board and just sort of durdles. It also searches out lands for you, which is good. We like hitting land drops in a slow deck like this. I only run 6 basics and only 3 of them planes. So I would recommend being a little careful about that, about just dumping all of your basics into the graveyard. I often search out 1 or 2 rather than the full amount. Alright, the mana base is fairly complex. We've got a lot of bells and whistles here, but I'll start with the basics. 3 mountains, 1 of which is snow-covered, and 3 plains, 1 of which is snow-covered. The snow-covered tech is for like extra planar lens nerds, or like, I don't run Field of the Dead, although I used to. It's also just intimidation, you know, gotta hit them with the gaming. We'll get a variety of dual lands. I run every dual land. The mana base is incredibly greedy. Every good dual land, with maybe a couple exceptions. The Pathway, Boros Garrison, I know people don't like this card, but I think it's pretty good, and it taps for a Sunforger unequipped, so I like it. Bite me. Sacred Peaks, Alpine Meadow are my 2 tap lands. This deck runs every fetch. I can often get away with getting a tap land in someone's end step. Yeah, Spectator Seating, Command Tower, Sunbaked Canyon, Sacred Foundry, and Plateau are going to be our untapped duels. We'll show those off. So we got a Spectator Seating, Command Tower. Sunbaked Canyon is especially good because of that draw mode. Our life total is a resource. We often have a lot. I've never had issues with doing this, and being able to draw our Enlightened Tutor target with the land is super good. And then we got a Sacred Foundry and a Plateau. Alright, so like I said, we're running every fetch. We want to see Mistful Plains every game, so even the off-color fetches are pretty solid. We got an Arid Mesa, a Windswept Heath, Marsh Flats, Floodstrand, and a Bloodstained Mire. Obviously, Bloodstained Mire can't fetch our Mistful Plains, but we do have some other targets, some non-basics it can fetch, and we run like rings and stuff, so there's a few other ways to get value. It's worth running, for sure. Alright, and then the utility lands. There's some spicy lands in here. I like utility lands. I run as many as I can stomach running in a 2-color deck. That's why I have 6 basics. Here's the fabled Mistful Plains. We've been talking it up so much. It puts target card in your graveyard on the bottom of your library, but you have to have 2 white permanents. Super easy in this deck to have 2 white permanents. I do find that sometimes I don't, but there's not a lot of ways to get permanents that aren't creatures that are good. If you want more, consider like a Robe of Stars or something. So we're also running Madblind Mountain. So this is from the same cycle. This one's way worse. But I think it's funny because it shuffles your library. And I run Sensei's Top, so that's come up. I don't have as many red permanents as I do white permanents, but hey, it's cool, and people read it and they're like, oh, okay. We run Croson Verge. This is a legal card, similar to the Fetchland situation. It finds Mistful Plains. It's basically an expedition map. Yeah. And then we got Buried Ruin. This is just a great piece. It gets the Sunforger out of your graveyard when you need it to. Colorless, but we have so much fixing that it's honestly not an issue. Inventor's Fair gains us a teeny bit of life, but primarily it searches Sunforger on a land. And then we got a Care Keep. This is for polymorph targets, and also because I like kobolds. Yeah. Lastly, I would like to show you the Planeswalkers. Luca's a polymorph on a stick. He technically has other text, but it's never relevant. There's no reason to attack this Planeswalker. It's -2 polymorphs, and then it sticks around and does nothing. I'll never plus him, so I'll never hit the ult. We got Karn. This is primarily for fetching Sunforger out of exile, although it's also an excuse to run Karn in your deck so that people can't play the game sometimes, which is good if you want to win. And then lastly, we have new inclusion, Chandra's Hope's Beacon. I have played with this once so far. I think it's solid. It's just a little slow, but I'm going to give it a couple more shots. I really like to add 2 mana in combination of colors ability because that is enough to unequip a Sunforger. Anyway, I'd like to thank the host for letting me come on here, and I hope you guys enjoyed looking at my deck. Check it out, guys. I looked everywhere at the convention for this, didn't find it, and they hooked me up. Let's go!
That's what this shit's about, buddy.
Yeah. Dude, really appreciate it. You made my day. All right, I'm Zach. That was my Godo Sunforger control deck. Thanks for having me on.